two parashiot, two sections in the Torah, if you exclude Noah, are named after non-Israelites, Jethro, Yitro, and Balak, the Moabite king in the book of Numbers. Whereas Balak seeks to curse the Israelites who wish to walk through his country to reach the promised land, Yitro brings blessings and wisdom to the Israelite people. In rabbinic literature, Agadah or Midrash, Jethro, the Midianite priest, father of Tzipporah, the wife of Moses, converts to Judaism and becomes the model and example of converts. We often think of Ruth in that context as the archetypal convert to Judaism in rabbinic literature, but actually Jethro comes first. The stories about Jethro are extensive, but they begin with the fact that he was an idolatrous priest in Midian. Like Abraham, he began to perceive the vanity of idols even before Moses turned up at his doorstep. Giving his advanced age as a pretext, Jethro then resigned from his priestly duties. In our parasha, as you've just heard, Jethro brings Tzipporah and her two sons, Gershom and Eliezer, to Moses in the desert. And the Midrash discusses the reasons why Jethro decided to make this journey and precisely when he made it. According to Rabbi Joshua, Jethro makes his way into the desert, having heard of Israel's defeat of Amalek, Israel's arch-enemy, and that led him, Jethro, to leave Midian. Another sage, Rabbi Elazar Hamodai, argues that what brought Jethro into the desert was the revelation at Mount Sinai, which means that story we heard should have been tacked on to the end of this week's Torah portion. And Rabbi Eliezer says, no, it wasn't either of these. It was the parting of the Sea of Reeds that brought Jethro to Moses. Later Midrashim simplify the discussion. Did Jethro come before or after the giving of the Torah? The Torah records him arriving before the giving of the Torah, with Moses bidding his father-in-law farewell before the momentous event of revelation. And some midrashic sources suggest, I think somewhat unkindly, that he is sent away before the giving of the Torah because he had not shared in the hardships experienced by the Israelites in slavery and as refugees in the desert, even though Jethro himself desired to go forth to a waste and desert wilderness. He had come from worldly splendor. In the Midrash, in the rabbinic tradition, Jethro's appeal to convert to Judaism was answered by God himself, quoting a verse from Jeremiah, Ha'elohei mikarov ani na'um Adonai, velo Elohei me'rachok, which is read not according to its plain meaning, but in this way by the rabbis, I am a God who will draw you near, and not a God who keeps you afar. I brought Jethro near, I did not keep him at a distance. So also, says God, when someone comes to you wishing to become a convert, so long as they come for the sake of heaven, you must bring them near and not push them away. Moses, who went out to meet his father-in-law, showing him great respect and honor, bringing him into his tent, accepts Jethro immediately as a convert, say the rabbis. And the Torah tells us, Vayichad Yitro al kol hatova, asher asa Adonai liYisrael. And Jethro rejoiced over all the kindness that the Eternal One had shown Israel. Now, the word for rejoice is rather an unusual word, I think. It's not the word samach from which we get the word simcha, but it's from the Hebrew word chada, chet daled he, and that gives rise to further interpretations with word plays on this word, vayichad. Jethro became, with a little bit of license, Yehudi. He became a Jew. Vayiched, he proclaimed the unity of God from the word echad, one. Chada, he passed a sharp knife over his flesh and was circumcised. Another meaning of this word chada, to pass a sharp knife. There are only a handful these are only a handful of the midrashim that portray Jethro as a Ger Tzedek, a righteous proselyte in Israel who accepted the Torah and was urged by Moses to travel with them to the promised land, but who chose, according to the Midrash, to return to his home in order to convert his fellow citizens, whose descendants, according to Agadah, were celebrated for their piety and learning. In the 38 years since I was ordained as a rabbi, the reasons for individuals wishing to convert to Judaism have changed in many ways. Yes, there are still a handful of people who come to Judaism through their Jewish partners and seek to convert. But many of those who come to us today are not seeking conversion for the purposes of marriage or partnership, but lishma, for the sake of heaven. Because perhaps like Jethro, they've heard of the teachings of Judaism, the oneness of God, the sense of belonging to one people, the observances of Shabbat and the festivals, prayer and the rituals of our life cycle, the ethical and moral laws that teach love for the stranger and justice for the poor and disadvantaged, among many others. But there are also other reasons that individuals seek conversion. In our post-Shoah and globalized world, with an increase in marriages and partnerships between people of different faiths, the descendants of those mixed marriages whose parents, grandparents, or great-grandparents may not have observed their religious heritage, may have turned their backs on their religious heritage, or who perhaps were fearful about declaring themselves to be Jewish in a world that had witnessed the Shoah. These people are reaching out to Jewish communities to reconnect with that Jewish heritage. For some, the discovery of a Jewish great-grandparent or grandparent has come late in their lives, with few family members left to whom they can address their questions. For others, there is a sense of having been robbed of something that might rightfully belong to them. And there are yet other individuals whose knowledge about their past remains so murky that it is only a sense of where their spiritual home might be that drives them on in their quest for a Jewish community and a sense of belonging that it brings. What is interesting to me is that Jethro, who is known by at least 4 different names in the Torah, can trace his genealogy back to Esau, the twin brother of Jacob. So what if Jethro, in our imaginative rabbinic world, is not only seeking conversion because he wants to pray in the same place of worship as his daughter and grandsons, or because he has heard what God did for Israel when they came out of Egypt? What if it is the voice of an ancestral God calling, or some subconscious motivation to reconnect with his spiritual heritage that draws him towards Sinai? And there's still one other aspect that I'm trying to understand and process in my own mind. And that is that since October the 7th, the number of people who have crossed the threshold of this synagogue, searching for a spiritual home, a place to worship, to study, to belong, has increased. I mentioned earlier Rabbi Joshua, who suggested that the reason Jethro joined Moses and the Israelites at Sinai was because of a battle, because of Israel's defeat of Amalek, who had attacked Israel just as they had left Egypt, massacring the most vulnerable, the women and children, at the rear of the column of refugees who had left Egypt. The war fought against Amalek, as told in the previous chapter, the one we read today, was a long and hard war. Amalek in the Torah, in the Hebrew Bible, becomes the archetypal enemy of Israel, the focus of military crises right the way throughout Tanakh, an enemy whom Israel seeks again and again to eradicate without success. There is another sermon here that will have to wait until Purim, Haman being a descendant of Amalek. But I am struck that October the 7th was and remains a significant and deeply painful catalyst that has drawn many individuals to identify with Judaism and the Jewish people. What was in Jethro's mind as he made that journey to Sinai? I want to recognize my lineage that goes back through Esau to Isaac and Rebekah, to Abraham and Sarah. I want to rebuild the connection with my Jewish heritage that was lost to me. I want to have a sense of belonging to a people who have suffered in the past and continue to suffer now. I want to discover some spiritual meaning to my existence through the life of the synagogue and its community of individuals. Of one thing I am certain: whatever the reasons for people wishing to become proselytes to Judaism, the word conversion is often a misnomer for those who seek to connect with their lost Jewish heritage. Our door must be open to allow for exploration and experience, and those of us privileged to be born as Jews, members of this congregation, must help our new arrivals to find their way into Klal Yisrael, the community of Israel, and understand what it means to be a liberal Jew in this bewildering and increasingly dangerous world in which we live.